Welcome back to the next video on compound interest. So then in previous video we discussed about the annual compounding while calculating the compound interest. When we say annual compounding, then what we mean is that the interest is given once in a year, that is the after the end of the year. Now the formula which we derived was, it is the amount at the end of say t number of years is P into 1 plus R over 100 raised to power T, where A is the amount what we get after the time period is over. Uh, P is the principal or the initial sum which is invested. R is the rate of interest and T is the time period number of years. Now the important term which we discussed in the last video was annual compounding. So what we said is that this formula is when the interest is compounded annually. Again, as I just discussed, when we say annual compounding, it means that interest is being given after the end of the end of year. So, for example, if the sum is invested for say a period of 5 years, then after the end of every year, the interest will be credited. Now, what are other ways the compounding can happen? Very frank, compounding can happen in number of ways. It could be, you know generally it is either half yearly or quarterly, but it can be monthly also. Now what is the impact if the compound is getting compounded say half yearly or quarterly or maybe monthly? Let's take an example. We'll take an example of half yearly, and then from there we'll try to derive a general formula. So let's say that this is our timeline. This is the starting, so it is the sorry, zero period. Okay, and this is say 1 year. So assume that we invest say rupees 100 for 1 year at, now this is the sign which is basically means at the rate, which we normally use in email, etc., right? So this is whenever we talk about the per annum rate, this is the general formula which we use. This is the general notation which we use, is at say 5%. Now, what is compound interest? Compound interest is that every year we're going to calculate the simple interest on the given principal, and at the end of the year, whatever interest comes, we reinvest, we add it back into the principal, and that is how the interest gets compounded. But generally, when we talk about the first year, we do nothing but we just calculate the simple interest. Okay. Now, so if rupees 100 is invested, say for the period of 1 year at 5%, what is the interest is going to get? Simple, right? We can always though derive it. So it is principal into rate of interest into 1 over 100. So 100 cancels 100, so which gives rupees 5. Okay, so interest is rupees 5. Now what we are talking is that we are taking this example to calculate the interest when it is compound half yearly. So if interest 5 rupees is given over the period of 1 year, then say in 6 months, somewhere halfway through, in 6 months, how much interest will come? Correct. It is 2.5 rupees. Now, when we say interest is getting compounded half yearly, so what exactly we mean is that this interest, which is accrued after the end of 6 months, 6 months or half year, this interest is added back to the principal amount. So after 6 months, what is the principal amount now is 102 point. Let me correct it here. It is going to be 102.5, right? How it has come? The initial amount which was invested was rupees 100. Over 6 months, the interest which is calculated is 2.5. And since it is getting compounded half yearly, it means 2.5 or 2 rupees 50 paisa is added back to the principal. Now, what happens is for next 6 months, let me change the color to differentiate. Yeah. So for next 6 months, the principal becomes 102.5. Rate of interest continues to be 5%. And what is the time period? Is half a year. Now, if you observe this, what is happening is what we have got here is nothing but half of the interest, right? So my interest, so I can look at it in two ways. Whether is that absolute interest which I'm getting is reduced by half, or maybe the percentage itself is reduced by half. Because 2.5 is what? 50% of 5%, right? This 2.5 is what? It is 50% of 5%, right? Or half of 5%. Half, okay? And what is happening to the time period? Earlier, we were getting interest once in a year. Now we are calculating it twice in a year. Twice in a year. Okay, so just this part, we are not going to do any further discussion on this. Just commit to memory this part because we will revisit again. Okay, commit to memory this part. We'll take now one more example where the interest is getting compounded quarterly. Interest is compounded quarterly. Now what happens now is that again we'll draw the timeline. I wish I could have taken a different color, but anyways, nevertheless, let's start it from here. Yeah, so the same example. At the time 0, principal invested is rupees 100. Rate of interest is 5%. Time period is 1 year. So again, end of the 5 year, end of 1 year, what we get? Rupees 105. I guess I don't have to calculate it again, right? Now, let's take a different color. Yeah. So what is happening is the interest, since it's getting compounded quarterly, interest is now being paid 4 times in a year. And when we talk about number of in terms of years, What does quarter means? Quarter means 3 months, consecutive 3 months. Okay. Now, when the interest was paid over the period of 1 year, the interest which was paid was rupees 5, right? This was for this entire period, right? When the interest was paid for 6 months, it was 2.5, or we can say half of 5%. Correct? Now, instead of 6 months, the interest is being paid quarterly. That is, now it is being paid twice in a year. So, what will happen to this interest? This will be half of this, or it will be half of 2.5%. And what is half of 2.5%? 1.25. And 1.25 is what? 1/4 of 5. And how many times in a year the interest is getting paid? One, two, three, and 4. So interest now is being paid 4 times, wherein the interest rate of interest is reduced by 1/4. Now let us refresh our memory. What was happening when the interest was compounded half yearly? Let me write it down here so that there's no confusion later on. It is interest compounded half yearly. You can always also call it as 6 monthly. 6 monthly. It's one same thing, right? Now what is happening is, when the interest was 5% over the period of 1 year, we calculated that in 6 months the interest which will be paid will be 2.5%. So the interest reduced by half, and the time period got multiplied by 2 because interest was paid twice in a year. When it was quarterly, then interest got reduced by 1/4, and time period became 4 times, right? So from these two things, or from these two equations, we can now generalize the formula. What is that? Amount is equal to P into 1 plus R over 100 raised to power, sorry, that's the problem when you use too many colors, right? Raised to the power T. Let me take a different color for T. That makes sense. So we'll correct this also, and we'll put T here. Okay. So this is the formula when it was getting compounded annually. Now, what we said, the rate is getting divided by 2 when it is half yearly and by 4 when it is quarterly. So let us assume, since we are trying to give a general formula, let us put it is getting divided by n. And the number with which it is getting divided, time period is getting multiplied. And what is n? Yeah, n is the number for compounding. So n is 2 when half yearly compounding, and n is 4 when it is quarterly compounding. What if the interest is getting compounded monthly? Simple. N is 12 when it is monthly compounding. Cool. So I'll just rewrite the formula. A is equal to P into 1 plus R over N times 100 raised to the power N times T. Now, can't we use this as a general formula? When, without getting into it, is that whether interest is getting compounded half yearly, quarterly, or annually, or monthly? Why not? Because, yeah, maybe that after about 25 years I have made this sign of because. Okay. Because in case of when, sorry, because when interest is compounded annually, then n will be what? N will be 1. So when we put n as 1, then the formula becomes what? A is equal to P times 1 plus R over 1 times 100 raised to the power 1 times the T, and this makes it P into 1 plus R over 100 raised to power T. And guess this is what? This is what? This is nothing but the formula which we derived when the interest was getting compounded annually. So, for all practical purposes, take this as formula. Just remember this formula. So when interest getting compounded annually, n becomes 1, This is your formula. When interest is getting compounded half yearly, n becomes 2. When the interest is getting compounded, n becomes 2. When interest is getting compounded quarterly, n becomes 4. When interest gets compounded monthly, n becomes 12. And what if the interest gets getting compounded twice in 2 years? I don't know what do you call it, biannually or 2 yearly. 2 yearly is better word, right? Then guess what is going to happen? So I'll just request you to pause the video for a while and just think over it. What will happen? N will become half, 1 by 2. Because here it's only in 1 year, only half of the interest is being paid. What was the rate? So this brings us to the end of this video. In next video, we'll take couple of questions and I'm going to refer, I guess R.D. Sharma book for this. Okay, so I'll try and take couple of examples, couple of questions, both for annual compounding, uh, quarterly compounding, half yearly compounding, and then we'll see that what kind of questions can come. Till then, watch the video multiple times, study hard, practice. See you. Bye.